everyone.
We're so glad you're here to join us for our fifth and final installment of our Table Talks series, this Lenten 2023 journey that we've all been on. This actually is our concluding Sunday forum based off of our Lenten theme, obviously, because next week is
On Sunday,
Yes.
Passion Sunday.
Passion Sunday. So to that end, we've been talking about, we began with our theology of the table through music and the liturgy. The session after that, we discussed through the wonderful leadership and wisdom of Christine Wallace, the scriptural historical foundations of our communion practices. And then the session after that, we talked about what are some contemporary ways that we can welcome people into the church. Actually, what does it mean for us to have a seat at the table? And I had two of my good friends from representing not only our congregation, but Kindred Lutheran, our kind of like our sister congregation, not our mother, not our brother, our sister, she's not that far off. And then last week we talked about the spirituality of the table. So what does it mean when we actually feast on Christ? What are some of the spiritual wisdom that we can kind of glean from the table? And so now there is a natural progression. This is what happens after we fed, after we've eaten, after we feasted on Christ. What is our journey as disciples as we leave this place? And so for today, we have curated, and I'm saying curated because it is curated, 5 of our representative service and care ministries, through which either you all are directly involved in, or you directly support by various means here through our congregation. And so I want to begin our time after this recap here to read a passage from Matthew, which will be our guiding passage for our panelists. And then when we actually proceed to our panelists here, it will be a little different than what we've done in the past couple of weeks. I won't introduce them. What I will do is I'll first start with Justin. Justin will stand up, and so on and so forth. Each one will stand up as they answer the first question. Just tell us who you are, what ministry you represent, and then finally answer the first question that I'm going to give you. So let's begin here. It is a passage found in the Gospel of Matthew, and it is typically read on Christ the King Sunday. Matthew chapter 25, starting on verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it when we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it when we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did to the one of the least of these who are the members of my family, you did it to me." Then he will say to those at his left hand, "You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then also will they answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to the one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." And I asked our presenters particularly to focus on the phrase, truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are the members of my family, you did it to me. With these words, the Son of Man connects the service and care to those in need with the person of Jesus Christ. And so I will ask you, this isn't confirmation or baptism. I will ask you. And I'll, if you forget the question, I'll ask you all again. How does your service and care deepen your own experience of God and your connection with others? And so I will start with Mr. Schneewen, Justin Schneewen. Justin, if you can introduce yourself, the ministry you represent, and if you can answer the question.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's Santa.
No, I think we're okay. I think you're okay. Well, whatever you want to do. Now I have to, yeah.
Yeah, Justin Freeman, my wife and I run the Houston Food Bank Ministry that we do through the church. So that's a group every other month. We do one of the projects at the Houston Food Bank site, the big warehouse they have on the west side of town. A few of y'all have been and have participated in that. And that's been something that the church has been doing for at
Well
least
over
25 years.
well over
more than
30.
that, yeah.
We know that it was going in the late 80s, so it's hard to trace it back much earlier than that. So yeah.
Yeah, so really one of our longest running ministries, one Yuri and I have really appreciated and enjoyed working with some of y'all doing and keeping that one going. So that's what we've been doing. Yeah, so when we got this email out, that's really one of my favorite verses. That's one that really, if you think about what are a few of the verses that define your faith or the aspirations of your faith, that's really one of them. That's what you've done to the least of these, you've done unto these. And I will point out, it does say, I think you fed me as the first one of all the things listed, so I'm not putting arguing that. What was the question again?
How does your service and care deepen your own experience of God?
Yeah, so I think, our group is, we're working in a warehouse setting, we are volunteering, it is something very physical. And you are, it is food going out to people, children getting food over the weekend who are on free lunch and wouldn't have anything otherwise, building a box for seniors who again would have to pick between a light bill or having something to eat. So, you are very directly serving the least of these when you're doing that. And I think it's such a great way to put your faith into action, physically live it out. Because it is such as she can tell you, a very physical activity. So it is, really taking your faith from something that could be, intellectually, spiritual, personally, and putting it into action and movement. And that's something we really enjoyed about it.
Thank you, Justin. All right, Carolyn, if Beverly, if you said they can just sit down and.
Well,
Is that all right?
I think so, Carolyn.
There you
Let's
go.
come on Zoom. Come on, Zoom.
Carolyn, please.
Okay, I'm Carolyn Jacobs, and I have served as the chair of the Synod's Central African Republic team for years and years. I'm also on paro right now. I've done various service and care things over the years. Is anyone speaking about on paro?
No.
Are you?
No.
Oh, okay, I can kind of speak about both, but. In addition to the verse that you read, one of our imperatives of our faith is to use our talents. And I think that through service and care, if we can find some place where we're using talents we have, that makes us feel that we're living our faith. And I was first invited to, I didn't know that the Senate had a global mission team. Phil Dahlberg invited me to come because there was a visitor from the Central African Republic where they speak French as the official language. And so that was my beginning. And I've used my French a lot during this period, translating things for correspondence and visits and so forth. Of course, connectedness to the individuals happens when you meet people on the ground, and I was fortunate to be able to go twice to the Central African Republic and also, we've had visitors come from there, and for example, the President Goldenkey, I remember especially, came and we went to Baton Rouge when the Senate Assembly was there, and he spoke there. So I think that's really how we live out our faith and feel connected to people. Also through Amparo has a lot of different things, but what I'm doing in connection with that right now is teaching ESL at St. James. And that, again, I'm using my teaching abilities. It's something that people really want, and they're so receptive, and they come and shake my hand afterwards and things like that. And so you really feel connected to people, and you're interacting with them as individuals.
And just a question there, Carolyn, so, just a little plug-in, right, the bishop of CAR is actually coming to our congregation, right? Right.
Yeah, in June 25th, he's going to preach it.
Yes, and we'll actually be also doing a class here for us too, so please come and join us.
And a lay person is coming up, lay one.
Excellent, thank you. Nathan,
Sure.
please enlighten us.
I don't know about that. But I'm Nathan Weicker. I'm here to represent Christian Community Service Center, CCSC for short. So I am, Wendy and I are the church reps for CCSC. I also serve as secretary for the board of CCSC Houston, which I'm very pleased to do. So we, as Christ the King, obviously support CCSC financially. We also have various food drives over the years, especially over COVID, to support that. It's traditionally been where we get food donations. That's where Beverly sometimes Sergio takes those donations. So we've done different things where Craftsman's Bread has leftover bread, and I know Jessica in town has spearheaded that, where they've taken that leftover bread. The young adults every other first Saturday of the month also volunteer in the food pantry off of Brandon Street. So various connections with CCSC. And Kathy, yeah, many people support JobNet, such as Kathy Howland. So
Raynetta.
using talents, Renetta. So lots of people, obviously in the congregation, share their talents with CCSC. CCSC has three major areas of focus: emergency services. And you hear emergency services, you're like, what does that mean for a food pantry? But it's really, CCSC wants to get people out of those crises into the next the next paycheck. So for utility bills, paying of utilities or food, and then obviously that gets them in the door for job services and different things. Job services is the second big one. I was at the Martha's Way celebration yesterday. We had a luncheon celebrating 23 years of Martha's Way, where they train housekeepers. But it's really it's more not just how to clean, but it's how to create your own business. And there was wonderful stories there. A lady spoke who had cancer and overcome that, and they bought their own house through this program. So, but it's also training, it's financial coaching, it's computer skills, it's resumes, etc. They've also just started a home caregiver program. So, as that becomes a bigger opportunity in the county. And finally, children's services, which is how a lot of people know CCSC, Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell Express. They have vision care. They have the back to school program where they provide backpacks and money for uniforms, etc. So, great organization. I really found it about 5 years ago, or actually 7 years ago now. Time flies, and it's near and dear to my heart. Getting to the question, for me, everyone has a different way they connect with God, whether it's prayer, liturgy, music, etc. For me, it really is service. That's where I feel God most at work for me. Feeding and helping the poor. One thing I commented with the connecting with others, which maybe is a different piece of that as CCSC does, which heartens me in this world we live in, is it is ecumenical, right? So There's no proselytizing allowed, right? That is strictly forbidden. But it's the one place, where all of these different denominations, very much Christ focused, can come together and really agree that helping the poor is the central tenet of the Christian faith, and it works. It works really, really well. Our current president is a Baptist preacher, and that kind of scares me in some things. But it doesn't, because I know CCSC and the history and the collaboration that it's found on so over 40 years. And it works, and that connection truly, transcends everything else that we don't agree on between the denominations, and that's one thing that just again proves that that's something that's central to the Christian faith.
Well, in some way, that kind of it's a clarity, it's a cleanse, like a lens that helps us really see what matters,
For sure.
Thank you. Bill, please enlighten us.
I'm Bill Benz with a few other people here at Christ the King and some people in the bicycling community in 2015. We established Three Wheels Houston. We started on Halloween in 2015 in the parking lot. Collected 15 bike frames. We've, I think this year, through the end of 2022, we've given bikes to more than 1,500 people. It's all volunteers. Bill Chapman, it's lots of people in this congregation and throughout the community. And when people get there, we don't talk politics. Seldom is heard a discouraging word. But people work on bikes, whether they know a lot about bike repair or not, we find something for them to do. Harry's become one of our faithful preppers. Coming every week. And we, it's a chance for people to use a talent that they may have had all their life, and they had started tinkering when they were teenagers, and now they're retired folks. They may not know much about bikes that are interested, and they may just be into service. And we give bikes away on Friday and Saturday. I remember a few weeks ago, there was a backhand woman about 30. She was so just zipping around the parking lot in this used and we take great care in what we do as far as repairing the bikes, cleaning them. They're in a lot better shape when they leave our shop than they were when they left Big Nat. And it's just been a refreshing thing. And I gotta tell you, there's always something in the liturgy in the readings. It's kind of my halftime talk. Gets you kind of charged up and ready to go. And it's Fridays and Saturdays magical. We give bikes. We gave a bike to a veteran a few weeks ago. He cried. Because people are trying to put their lives back together, whether they came from Kabul or they are coming from, they've been struggling and they're recently off the streets. They want to move, they want their lives to move forward. And Matthew didn't know about bicycles. But it's a lot of fun and it's very rewarding.
He didn't know about bicycle, but he would certainly share that phrase that you said. It's magical, right? There's something godly about being able to see that experience. Something that's like, right? Because they've been through so much, right? There's so much that we, as what I'm hearing is, there's so much you can do when you're directly serving and you're experiencing people. You just see one part of the story. right? And maybe that part of the story is a story where, you know, you have these deliverables happening, right? You're actually feeding, right? Imagine just the back end of all of that story, right? How much hurt and pain is there? And then getting to this one, we call this one climax point of our parable that is life, right? And there's feeding, and that happens. Right? I think I want to say that because I think we need to be clear that, right, in all of what we do with service and care, there are these stories. The stories of countless people, right, that while we can say, we can have numbers, we have these important anecdotal elements, balance it out with, there's a story of pain and hurt that is being transformed through the very work, right? The work that even we have free wills, even with the bicycle, there is transformation. Terry, that we go down with Terry, President Terry. Terry, please tell
Of
us.
course, I want to give a plug for Bill, for free meals. It's awesome, and it's a very tangible, I mean, you know, we all give in different ways and give in different parts of ourselves, but it's a very tangible thing. This is what I like. You can go there, there's a bike, it's covered with dirt, and the tires are flat, and you can fix that bike and make it shine. And it's a real thing that you're giving this. It's just awesome. If you ever have a change, you should check out. So I'm Terry Kohler, and I, for many years, have been organizing what we call the meals team here at Christ the King. This service is different than the previous ones you've heard about because this is an internal service. So with this part of service and care, we're looking after each other. So generally speaking, we are not providing meals to the community outside of our congregation. We're providing meals to members of our congregation who are, say, in need. By need, I mean, are going through potentially some life experience, which, in which they could use some extra care. Whether it's the birth of a new child, or a death in the family, or an illness in the family, or loss of a job, you know, some challenges recently happened to that person or that family. And so we, what I do is I'd say the last probably 10 years, I've been doing this for a long time. I haven't actually been one of the delivery people. I've been mainly organizing this, just because I had professional obligations that I didn't really have as much time. But I'll tell you about what it means to bring it. So, you know, we're called to be Christ to one another. And this is such an example of that. It's not about the food. It's absolutely not about the food. We're a pretty wealthy congregation. If you get sick, or, you know, heaven forbid you have a death in your family and you're in your mourning, I mean, there's Uber Eats, right? There's DoorDash. I mean, you can get food, right? We all have freezers. We have stuff in our freezers. So it's not about the food. It's about the connection. It's about going to the door, ringing that bell, knocking on the knocker, and presenting these people, a person with an example of our love. And it's really an awesome thing to do. And in terms of connecting, there are folks, depending upon their personality and also where they are and whatever has happened to them, they may just say thank you and shut the door, or they may say, you want to come in for a minute? I'll have a cup of tea. So we're, you know, you can get a sense for who wants to talk and who's just happy and thankful for the gift, but wants to be alone. And but that whether it's, you know, 20 minutes or 5 seconds, that exchange is just a wonderful thing. And so the way this works is that Beverly will hear of someone in the congregation who may be appreciative of this kind of a gift. She contacts me, and then I put the word out. We have a pretty large team of volunteers, and I'll just by email put the word out. So-and-so would like, you know, 3 meals a week for the next 2 weeks, or whatever the case may be. And people respond by email, and I, you know, there's certain dates are available, and we just set the whole thing up. And so I'll say personally, I've experienced this on the receiving end as a very, very new member of our congregation. When I hardly knew anyone, I had a crisis in my family, and try not to cry. The doorbell rings, and 2 people are there who I've never met. This was Cliff Helmkamp and Fran Moncure, who has since passed away. And they were there at my door, and I had visitors from out of town with a feast. And it was just unbelievable. And never mind, I was vegetarian and they brought chicken. It was just an amazing day. And so I encourage you, it doesn't take much effort to put your name on my list. And if you're busy, you're busy. I mean, you know, that's fine. Calls go out every once in a while, not that frequently. And if you have the time, you can.
Thank you for being vulnerable, Terry. Are there any questions for our presenters at this point? Anything you'd like to either ask them about their experience of getting into these particular ministries? Any questions, any just open questions about their particular ministries? Or is there anything you want to talk about in terms of service and care at this point? Or we can go on to the next question. On to the next one. That was easy. All right. So we've been talking about table. What is the table, right? We talked about the table in the very narrow theological sense, which is, for us, the table is the gift of Jesus Christ's body and blood for us, given to us through the signs of bread and wine. That's something that we receive every Sunday as a part of not just our worship, but as a part of what it means to be church. So that's one narrow definition of table we've been working with. Now, there's a more expansive definition of table that we've been trying to discuss, which has been what table means: people seated together in fellowship. Table means there is food being shared, wine being drunken, people being fed and clothed and given bicycles, and people from different parts of the world coming together to join and be one body. And so I that kind of expansive definition of table that's what I'm gonna ask you all about this question. How is this experience of table? Because I would say each and every one of you have that different angle, that different experience of this wider expansive table. How does that inform your sense of being a disciple of Christ? How has that informed your sense of being a disciple of Christ? And we'll open the floor to whoever wants to start first. And then we'll just let free discussion go. And start with you, Nathan. I'm looking at you. Nathan.
So obviously, coming around the table, I touched on a little bit the different denominations, and it distills, what being a true disciple of Jesus is, right? Is serving others first and foremost, full stop. No questions asked. There's no arguments there, hopefully, within the various denominations. So that's been, again, very great to see. And it furthers that is the content. I think the other piece is coming together with those less fortunate, right? And those of different backgrounds. Again, CCSC doesn't obviously discriminate against anybody with documentation, nothing. When they come in the door, they're at the table, right? And they're there to be in fellowship and be served with no other ulterior and furthers the discipleship, or my belief in discipleship.
I'd like to say a couple of things. One, I've been reading Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. And at the beginning of the book, he talks about the missionary impulse and importance to Christianity, but the danger of looking at those in need as objects rather than human beings. And he said, Christianity has often been guilty of it. And I was thinking about missionary work, companion synod. One thing that the ELCA does to avoid that kind of thing is the ELCA never advises those in companion synod relationship never to just make a decision, we're going to provide this for our companions. We only provide things that they ask for, because then you're interacting with them as individuals and you know that they need it. And the main thing is the interaction with other human beings. And when that happens, then you really have discipleship. And I wanted to just mention that the experience of taking communion in CAR in a small church, you know, the churches are very rustic compared to most of ours. You know, if they have a roof, it's a metal roof. They a lot of times don't have money for wine, so they only have communion when they have enough, they have wine. They don't have enough glasses, or they have little plastic cups. This one church I was thinking of in particular, they have somebody stands there with a bowl of water, and then they have a tray with cups with wine and bread. And they ask visitors or anyone there to help serve. It's not just the pastor or the, you know, people who are doing the service that serve. And so you serve communion, and then when they run out of cups, they wash them out in this little bowl of water and serve it, use them again. But there's something very humbling in communion in that kind of setting. And the people are so joyful in spite of, you know, their need. So again, when you can participate in this and you're interacting, you're interacting with each other as human beings, that is discipleship.
Carolyn, others, anyone want to respond?
So. I think, Houston is a place of boundless opportunity. And that's one of the reasons why Houston is the city that, since the Vietnamese boat people resettled more refugees than any other city in the United States. But the refugees, whether they're from Democratic Republic of Congo, Malawi, Rohingya from Myanmar, Afghans, Syrians, you know, from a lot of places. Houston welcomes them. And Houston has, relatively speaking, affordable housing. It may not be great, but it's a roof over their heads. And there's lots of employment opportunities. But that's not to say Houston doesn't have a lot of challenges. And if you give somebody who just went through this whirlwind of being, you know, may have been a security guard at the airport in Kabul, and he and his family get loaded on an airplane and they end up at Fort Bliss for a few weeks, and then they end up in Houston. They may not be literate in any language. They're in an apartment in Southwest Houston, which would be pretty isolating. And give them a life, chance to get out, shop for their families, look for work. We had a guy, an Afghan translator, who rode his bike to Toastmasters class because he wanted his English to be better. And, you know, to be part of this movement in Houston is, I mean, to me, it's really moving and exciting.
So I want to comment, because this in my mind is generating a couple of things. There's in practical theology today, so there's obviously several fields in the tool house that pastors use. Practical theology is basically the way in which we deal with questions that eminently deal with our intersection of life and faith. And the current trajectory in practical theology in particular is this question of the other, right? There's a whole subfield called the other. And it really is based off of the work of the eminent philosopher from Argentina who does most of this work in Ciudad Mexico, Enrique Lucet, one of my favorites. He talks in his work on the philosophy of liberation that, you know, in the way that the world is now, out of, you know, you can think of this series, the history of colonization, et cetera, right? There's this reality that there are the normative folks, and then there's the gaze of someone that is completely different from who we are, who we call the other. And the problem is that we tend to forget, and as we embody in our own kind of, our own ways of the world, that the other also lives in their own particular ways of the world, sees the world, has different concerns, has different relationships to food and to spaces and to locations. And a lot of theologians today, in particular, one of the professors that I almost learned under, but she's at Warburg, Professor Dr. Madhe Yip says in her work on the other is the importance of theologians, the importance of folks like you all and all of us here, is when we deal with the other, we don't just deal with them as objects, right? The others are, we use the other as just something as a placeholder value, but it really should be, we need to listen to the folks. We need to be able to see where the folks are coming from and learn from. There's not just, and our three presenters that lead for right now, and I'm gonna open up to the other two here shortly, right? It isn't just about we're giving of ourselves, right? That we are the ones that have all the knowledge and the resources and understanding. It's a two-way road, always a two-way road. Us and the other, and then we learn from the other, right? We are transformed on account of the other, right? That's really, at least how I hear this is, it's not only that you all have served, but you've been transformed by the interaction of someone that is the quote other in society. And so, and in some respects, Terry, at least the experience you're talking about, I mean, you were in some respects another, right? That brought transfer, that was received transformation, but at this point is helping us transform this very place. Would you say something?
I guess it's just, again, I'm a little bit different because we're talking about serving within our congregation, but certainly, when I would deliver food or people on our team deliver food, there is you receive a lot of grace from people, and you hear it's a chance to make that connection outside of our campus, right? And so you can be a receiver of their story, their personal story, if they're inclined to share, and there's a great lesson. If I hadn't just
No, that's great. And actually, it reminds me, well, just you talked about kind of your faith's been growing, right? As an account of your work, right, at the food bank. Can you help us understand that a little more? How has that grown for you?
Yeah, and I'll even bring it back a little bit to answer the previous question about the table. I would say, when we talk about that, when we do communion every Sunday, that's, the physical, engaged, kind of tangible part, right? The rest of it is all very nice, but that's really, it takes on a different dimension. And I think similarly, volunteering, working, when we go to the food bank, we all have our t-shirts on that say God's work, our hand. It's really a great reminder that there is a physical dimension of this. There is an active part of this. It's not always, an internal, personal, intellectual consideration. There is, very tangible, physical, real, touchable part of that. Like, in the same way that, being in communion, being at the table, having that physical interaction with the bread, with the wine, it to me is very similar to going out volunteering and having that physical interaction of, putting a senior box together for someone in need. We, maybe similar to Terry, we don't meet the end recipients, we don't really meet the clients who are working in a warehouse situation, but we always know what we're working on. We're always thinking about, who are the type of people this is going to, what are the challenges that we're experiencing. And yeah, I think, again, it's just a great, physical way to live out your faith.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Now we open this up to the room. Naomi, please.
Well, carrying the metaphor of the table far beyond it should be. Several images come to my mind, especially as I see the five of you there, and thank you very much. Is that each table has a lot of different legs. And I was thinking about that even after last week, if we could, as Christians, identify what those legs are, because a tabletop needs some kind of legs. And I guess in a way, when we go to communion, we're kind of the legs of receiving what's on the table. So that's one thing I was thinking of. You know, the physical you mentioned, the spiritual, the leadership that Nathan mentioned, the body, mind, spirit, and community. And all of those 4 legs kind of came up. But the table has many legs. You can have a table with 2 legs, 3 legs, 6 legs. So that just image came to my mind. And then another image came to my mind, especially now at the end, is how easy it is to move a table by ourselves. You know, I can't move these ones that we're gonna eat at later this morning, but I can move a 2-legged table. And I think Terry, that image came to mind when you were talking. We're taking the table to the congregational members that we serve. And sometimes we take a light table and sometimes we take a heavy table that someone else has to hold up. So anyway, the pictures of the table are just flowing through me right now. And so thank you for that image and associating that with Lent.
Please.
It's a little bit different, but I think also in Houston particularly, as Bill said, we have so much opportunity to see other people, and it goes into your other. We went to a Navut celebration last week, which is the Persian New Year. It begins on the first day of spring and it ends on the last day of winter. And they have a table that is special in the tradition that holds certain things. They call it the 7 S's, and naturally, when you don't speak Farsi, you don't know how these things hang together. But they had these 7 things on the table, and it was meaningful for them. And it connects also to serving others and to, in some way, putting the world upside down. Because part of the Navruz celebration is that you elect a different king of the day. It's not the person in power who makes the decision, but it is a disadvantaged person who is king of the day and has the power to right wrongs that other people bring to him. So Houston is, I think we tend to look at the divisions, and we need to learn more to look at communalities and at the significance of the table for different people that live around us. It was very interesting.
And it's, in some respects, right, it's, we have to focus more that the people are fed and changed more by what we kind of literally share at the table, rather than what we throw each other at the table. It's not a food fight, it's now, passing around the plate. People. Others, any comments? Yes.
The idea of table, and to me, it's the issue is who is at the table.
Right.
And who's not. That goes back to your mention of the other that exists for all of us in a sense. And it goes back to Paul's letter, particularly in the Ephesians state. They have a communion with the rich people in kind of one room and the other people who got some crumbs in the other, in the second room. And that's apparently existed up until now. And a comment that I heard someplace, I think I know where I can find it for you, is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So how do we get the others? How do we get that table defined so that you have a seat in? And it's bigger than our table, even our tables that we talk about here, I think. So anyhow, that's
Thank
like
you,
you said,
Richard. Thank you. Robert.
Yeah, I'm a retired clergy, and some of you don't know that, but I'm a retired clergy. So one of the things that we did as clergy for 40 years was to do home communions. And there are, any congregation has like about 40, 60, we have a list, and we just have to do this. And this was before we had people
Like
who went.
Chris.
This was always very delightful. To go into a home, and you didn't just go into a home and spend 15 minutes there, it was about an hour and a half. And, you would enter. And then. Have some little chit chat, and then you do come in. Then. You would all have some little repast. And I discovered, I'm just thinking of one particular lady that I just did, that you can make an apple, you can bake an apple in the microwave. Take the center out and fill that center with whipped cream. And I always delighted in visiting this lady. She was a poor lady, but she always had an apple for her pasta. And I came over a period of 40 years to see that you were in giving of yourself, you were giving your time. You were actually giving a part of your life. As you saw these people, so it was not just a matter of coming and giving gifts of forgiveness, life, and salvation, and bread and wine, but yourself insofar as you were actually giving time, not coming in and going out. And that time spent talking about all kinds of nonsense. Voice was just
In a sense, when you gave of yourself, right? What did you receive in return? Is that story? It's a story.
their life.
Yeah,
I think, well, there was a share. I received their life, they received my life, and they received the words of Jesus.
mhm. And so did you, correct?
I received that from them. So it wasn't a one-day thing.
And speaking of stories, you go, well, these are just nonsensical stories. I mean, chit chat stuff. And yet, look, how many years later, this story has come forward to instruct us. So right there is
It's,
the lesson
yeah.
story.
So when you want to visit somebody that's a gift for life, you only have so many minutes.
Pastor Durr. I see you nodding your head.
I'm a retired pastor.
I love that story because I can repeat that in 50 different ways too, and you can't do. But I want to, it seems to be, since this is the last one of these, next week we'll be doing other things, and the week after other things. Might be worth just hearing how we got to this subject of the table. Because I think it relates to everything you all have said. It started with a parent of a young adult, teenager, coming to Ben Remmert and saying, you know, after COVID, we really need the church to teach the kids table manners because they forgot how to do that. And that was the plant of table. Stand up.
Because we can't, yeah, so you
Okay,
can,
stand up. So the
Thank you.
plan in our heads was that we're gonna do table manners. And so we started to plan around this. And then the second thing that fit into this was a plan with the training of the assisting ministers. And somehow in that conversation, we talked about why there's no cross on the altar, the table. And so this is the reason. And it seemed that no one knew this reason. In a Christian church, because we started in houses, the symbol of Christ is not the cross. It is a symbol of Christ, but the abiding symbol of Jesus Christ in the presence of the people is a table. And that table doesn't need any adorning at all, because that's the presence of Christ. So from there went to the next step, which is, if that table is the presence of Christ, what about every other table? Literally every other table. And lots of them in this building. But think about your dinner table. Or your, just go on and on and on. So out of those two pieces, the theologian in our midst shape this, this 6 weeks of presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And learned something from it, because it was really it started with a parent talking about tables of a teenager raising one question, and it ended up with this conversation today. I also want to take a little issue with Pastor Rodriguez. There is evidence of bicycles in the Bible.
Oh,
Ezekiel, right?
Which-
Ezekiel saw the wheel,
He's-
and it's so you remember that, you know, that wheel was on something.
yeah,
Okay, that's all I want.
That's perfect.
Kathy, please.
So, thinking about tables, and I'm thinking about it from a work standpoint for, meetings that we're all in. And people always talk about, the importance of having a seat at the table. And it's not enough just have a seat at the table, but it's also the ability to speak at the table or to listen and be heard. And so I'm thinking that this table, theme, resonates throughout many aspects of our lives, and that a lot of discussion about DEI issues include being heard, being able to speak and not being spoken over or not being scared to speak. And so thinking about table manners more broadly in terms of how we communicate and who we hear from and those.
Thank you, Kathy. Are we at time?
Pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
There is an image that we actually wanted to use. We didn't have enough time to get permission to use it, but you are more than welcome to go to our sacristy. And you will see an image that probably all are familiar with because you're familiar with the artist, Heishi. It is an image of Jesus with two folks, and they're at this little place called Emmaus. And this is the famous scene, the famous resurrection scene, which is quite timely to talk about now because we're coming to the great 3 days. And I want us to end on that because in some respects, what we've all been talking about the table in its different dimensions, not just in who's at the table, who's speaking at the table, right? All of what we are doing here is simply to steward that great mystery, right? Paul says it quite clearly, you are servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Can you understand that those very mysteries are the mysteries of these stories of the table in the various shades that they come to us that we have experienced? Can you allow yourself to be transformed by those very mysteries, those very stories in the midst? And it's important for us to be transformed by them because we have to hear them. Those are stories of folks that are unlike us, that in some respects may not have a place at our table here right now, but they do. You have to listen and listen carefully. And so as we enter into these, the great mystery of the Christian faith and celebrate the death and resurrection of Christ, let's not forget there's a meal at the end of all this. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you all. Thanks, everyone.